Good day and welcome to this Tuesday afternoon, first segment of A Week at the Plot. And as you can see, our tomatoes are in. I've been wanting to get them in for about 10 days, 2 weeks, and finally found time on Sunday. And I'm going to take you back to me actually doing this job. I did do footage. I didn't chat about it, so I think what I'm going to do is do a voiceover when I get back home, so that when I flip to Sunday, which I'm going to do in a moment, you also have a chance to know exactly what was in my mind and what I was doing. I did plant these 2 peppers today and these 2 extra tomatoes yesterday. Those 4 things were remnants of our gate sale, so I thought, yep, I'll pop them in. Anyway, let's pop back in time to Sunday morning. My first job was to take up the cardboard that hadn't broken down over the winter. I'd put it down on the bed in October or November and then covered it in some compost, but not a thick layer. And because we had a really mild winter and not particularly wet, I don't think the worms were that active close to the surface of the soil, so there's quite a bit of cardboard that hasn't been broken down. You can see it right at the front here as well. So that I wanted to take up because I found that if I leave that on beds at our plot, slugs and snails really love to live underneath it. That's all going off to the compost bin. I'll tear it up and throw it in another day though. I came back and with my rake turned upside down, so not with the prongs down but with the prongs up, I'm just levelling off the soil a little bit. You want the soil sort of as level as it sort of roughly can be for watering purposes. Here are the tomatoes, which are a whole mix. There's Amish paste in there, black crim, rose de bain. There's also one which I call Isle of Wight yellow. A subscriber sent us a box of tomatoes from the Isle of Wight tomato company last year or the year before, can't remember which. And I saved the seed from a particularly nice yellow tomato. You can also see there's a poppy just by my hand. I did decide to take that out because, we've got poppies elsewhere. I'm just checking that they're all spaced out as I want, and they are. So I start planting them up. As you can see, they're about sort of like 1.5 foot. There's some that are about 2 foot tall. And the pot itself, I think, is about 4.5 inches deep. So I'm making a pretty deep hole, about 10-12 inches deep. Also making sure that the base of that hole is actually soft compost, i.e. loose compost, and not compacted. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just sort of roughing up the surface further below to make sure that when the roots do get out, they've got good soil to go into and not compacted soil. In it goes 3 or 4 inches deeper. That wind is pretty something, or was pretty something on Sunday. Firming in and making sure that there's soil right around the whole plant. Firming in a little bit more, and then just making a little sort of moat around so that when I water, the water holds in place there. And then getting on with the next one in exactly the same way. Digging a deep hole with my hand trowel and making sure that if there are any weeds, which there were in this one, I pull them out as much as I can. Despite this being a no-dig bed, there are couch grass and bindweed about 1 foot down, 10 inches to 1 foot down. When I put them onto the path like I did then, I'd pick them up later. This is me giving you an overhead shot of that same plant, that same hole. Sorry about the leg. It was the tripod leg. See, there's weeds that I'm pulling out there, and yeah, I'll make sure that they're picked up from the path afterwards. And then the tomato plant is going in. Quite a nice root ball on all of them, taking that leaf off. I mean, the thing is that these stalks on the tomatoes, they've got little hairs that will develop into roots. So tucking it firmly in, 3 or 4 inches deeper than it was, maybe even 5, I think 4 for this one. Firming in a little bit more, and then just that little moat again. Yeah. That's most of the tomatoes in now. They've all been planted a little bit deeper, maybe by 4, even 5 inches with some of them. Some of them were sort of about 2 foot tall. So this one here is a large one. But I just thought I would put 2 that were similar size into the ground, so that hopefully you can see this one has been planted deeper. This one is going to be planted deeper, but is currently at the same height, same level as the top of the compost as it was in the pot. So you can see that once this one is in the ground, it will be quite a bit shorter, so because it will be quite a lot deeper. Let me get that in the ground, and then you can see how it is different. Hopefully you can see how that's now about 3 or 4 inches deeper than it was before, and is now sort of at the same height as the one next to it, which was about the same size. Back to me in my voiceover, obviously giving each plant a really good water, and I'd do the same in about 30 minutes too. There we are. That was my job on Sunday. I got various other things done as well, but that was my main job done, and I have to say it exhausted me. Not quite sure why. I think it's just the few weeks and the challenges that I've had sort of in work and things over the last few weeks. So I felt quite exhausted by it all, but the job is now done. And of course they were really well watered in on the day I planted them, which was Sunday for most of them. Then yesterday, Monday, they had another really good dredging of water. I watered them all once, and then about half an hour later I watered them all again. And today I'm going to do exactly the same thing, despite it having rained and drizzled quite a lot of today. It's really been changeable today. This morning was grey and wet, and then this afternoon the sun is trying to come through, and it's coming through in sort of short spurts and then sort of vanishing again. But because the root ball of those tomatoes are all quite deep, you want to make sure that you're putting enough water down that it gets down to that root ball. You know, you don't want the root ball below ground not to be taking in enough water, especially at this stage when we planted those deeper and any hairs that develop into roots above aren't there yet to themselves take in more water. So most of the water coming in is going to be through that root ball. So we want to make sure when we plant things really deeply that we water them extremely well, particularly for the first week or so, to make sure that that root ball is taking up the water that it needs so that the whole plant can flourish. I won't be feeding them yet. I'll just let them establish a bit, and then I'll give them a bit of feed maybe later in the week. But yeah, that is our tomatoes in, and I'm really chuffed. And as I say, a couple of extra from the gate sale that were remnants, and 2 sweet peppers as well that have gone in. I did keep 4 chilies and 2 sweet peppers aside for someone, because they said, would I do that? I've done it, and then they said, oh, I bought them at the garden centre, so I don't need them. So I've offered the chilies out to everybody here on our WhatsApp group, and I bought those 2 peppers. So yeah, anyway, that's it for today's first segment of A Week at the Plot. Not a lot going on today or yesterday because of the rather chillier, inclement weather, but I think I'm going to just carry on now, maybe for half an hour more, and just do a bit of weeding and a bit of tidying, because there's always weeding and tidying to do. Right, see you again very soon. Bye. Good day on a rather blustery Wednesday afternoon. This is a mix of lettuce. This one needs some water. Look, that's a bit too dry there. Some of these are going to go into the poly now, some are going to go outside. These are all parsley, which are going outside. Coriander there, the smaller ones, which I think will be going outside today as well. I believe this is a rocket, and at the back there we've got a dill. So I'm about to sow some more lettuce seeds. So yeah, I'm going to sort these out and get these in, and then once I've done that, these are Lollo Beyonder here, which are still quite small, and here are our own saved seeds, and I think I'm going to prick these out into modules. In fact, if we come back over here, I've got spaces, I've got compost here already filled here. I think I'm going to empty these. Obviously I'll empty them because I'm going to put them in. I think they can go in there, and then I'm going to sow some seeds as well. If we just go into the poly, you see the mess there. I need to sort that out. I was going to sort it out this weekend, this cutting all this grass back. I'm going to have to sort it out this weekend despite the rain. This is where our lettuce bed is in here. So I've got room for lettuce to go in. These we're now picking. These I think were the outrageous lettuce, rather nice. And then some of these are quite small. And then what I've also done, you may remember that a friend gave me some lettuce. So I cut the root ball off, took the lettuce leaves, and I planted the root ball up. This one was the first one they gave me, and then they gave me those 2 as well. So I planted the root ball back in, hoping that they'll regrow. And as you can see here, this one definitely is regrowing, which is lovely. But yeah, we need to have a lot of lettuce sandwiches. Mind you, we do use a lot of lettuce. Anyway, I've got to carry on with my jobs. These are now all in and watered. It's likely to rain. In fact, it's just spitting at the moment. It's likely to rain overnight, and then we've got a band of rain supposedly sweeping through on Thursday, which is tomorrow, and then another one on Saturday. So I have put some of those nematode pellets that I put down in the broad bean bed, which is now the squash bed, which I put down a few weeks ago. So fingers crossed on those. And because it's very breezy, let's just pop into the poly. Just looking at the root ball of these 2, they could definitely have gone in a week or so ago. But I'm just going to pull this out a bit, loosen up the bottom, and in they're going to go in now. The other 2, the one that was dry, and there was another one that was drying as well, I've just put them to soak for a short while, and then they will follow these 2 into the ground. Just tease them gently out, loosen them a bit. Made a hole already. Firm them in, not too much, but so that they're firm. Loosen those up a bit. Can't see it from the angle you're doing, but those are in, and I've got 2 spaces there for the other 2, and then we should be okay. At the front we've got the pricked out lettuce of our own save seed, and then at the back is the Lollo Beyonder, and then look, a cheeky prince has germinated. Yay! Anyway, more on that maybe in a few days if a few others germinate. I haven't sown further lettuce seed, though, with the weather being inclement supposedly tomorrow. That sounds like a good job for me to do then. See you very soon. Bye. Good day and welcome to Friday afternoon at the plot. And you may remember I was going to put beans in here, but I've decided that I'm not. I've changed my mind yet again. I've decided I'm not going to do climbing beans this year. I'm only going to do dwarf or bush beans, as they're called in America. So I don't want to do bush beans in here. I want them to have more air going through them, because if I put them in here I'd have to take the poppies out, and I don't want to take the poppies out and the evening primrose. So what I've decided is, now that I've got some cheeky prints coming through, if they develop, which I hope they will, I will put them in this bed and then they can grow amidst the poppies. And then the bed that I'm going to put the beans into, the dwarf stroke bush beans, is at the back. This is the bed that the dwarf beans are going to go into. I'm doing 3 types. I'm doing a Borlotti, I'm doing a flat yellow French bean, and I'm doing Rockencore, which is a yellow cylindrical French bean. And as you can see, I've put lines in. 2 lines are in there. They're about a foot apart. I expect to be able to get maybe 5 or 6 rows in here, definitely 5, maybe 6. And I'm going to plant the seeds about 10 centimeters apart. Yeah, I could go to a foot or maybe even more, but I think I'm going to be a bit cheeky and put less space in. So about 10 centimeters. Making a hole with my finger and letting them drop in. Hole with my finger, in it goes. Hole with my finger, it drops in. In it goes. Right, that's 6 rows of dwarf stroke bush beans in. 2 rows of French yellow flat beans, 2 rows of yellow French beans called Rockencore, and 2 rows of borlotti. The borlotti will stay in, and well, as long as they all grow, they will mature, and the harvest will be as dried beans in dried pods, and the Rockencore and the French yellow flat will be as the pod. So we'll be harvesting those two for the pod and the borlotti for the dried bean. We might harvest the borlotti demi-sec, so semi-dried, in which case they would go into the freezer to be used directly into soup, so not have to be reconstituted because they're only half dried. We have hundreds and hundreds of these around the plot at the moment. These are the ladybird larvae that we saw less than a week ago, which have now stuck themselves onto the edges of various things to pupate in, and then from this they will become ladybirds. So many there really are, and there's still loads of ladybird larvae. In fact, look, there's one there. Not sure if you can see, but there's one there. So that will become one of those, and then one of those, each of those rather, will become a ladybird, fingers crossed. Isn't nature amazing? So that is our beans for this year done. And as I say that, I wonder whether I should be sowing some into pots or modules in case any of those get munched on, in which case I'll have ones to replace them should they get munched on. I'm sure Dad didn't have to do twice sowings of things regularly. I don't know. I will mull that. I mean, of course, I hope they will germinate fine. They will come into being really good seedlings. They'll come into being strong little plants, and they'll come into being strong little bushes, and then they will flower, and they'll be pollinated, and then they'll develop beans, and then we can harvest them. That's what I hope. And then I think back to those broad beans where we sowed them and they got taken by mice. I will mull that. I mean, we're early enough in the season now anyway that if they do germinate and they get munched on, there's time to put another seed in the ground for that to germinate and bring about a little bit of a later crop. It's just whether they get eaten by anything and whether I should have spares and backups. I guess I should. Well, you know what? I've only got a few more borlotti left. I've only got a few more of the yellow flat left. So I think I will sow a module, the bigger modules that we've got of the Rockencore. I will do that. Because then if nothing happens to these, i.e. they grow on well, I can put them somewhere else. We do have space. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I can't do it with the others because I've got too few seeds anyway. So that's fine. There we are. There we are. Instant thinking and problem solving, which of course is what you expect from me. And then of course I changed my mind as well, like deciding not to grow the beans in the plot in the bed by the greenhouse, but at the back there. We are due, it is forecast that we will have buckets and buckets and buckets of rain tomorrow. There is a big band of rain coming in. I think it goes from sort of Leeds right down below England into the English Channel. So I don't think I will be here tomorrow. So I think, in fact, this is going to be the last segment of this week's A Week at the Plot. Let's just say that now. Yes, it is going to be. That gives me Saturday to edit this and to record Sunday chat, of course. And maybe Sunday, if I can get down here and do a few things, maybe we'll look at that next week. But yeah, I've also just taken a delivery of steel tracks. These have been used, I think it's in HS2. We've got 20. They're about 2 meters by 30 by 10, and they're steel tracks, which I've said we will have, and I've just stored them at the moment by a trailer, which we need to get rid of. I think we'll use that along the banks. If we can raise the level of the banks at a few points, even if it's just, 10, 12 centimeters, that will reduce the detritus coming onto the site when this site does flood, like we had a really bad flood last year. And in fact, as I think about that, I think I might get another, or ask for another 20 of those, or even 30 of them. They're pretty compact and stack quite well. They could stack at the back of the communal shed. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. So yeah, there's thinking. And also we've got a couple of places where plot edges have been eroded, and the pathway, the communal pathway, is getting narrower and less stable at the edges. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some of those to stabilize the side, the edge of the plot, and the edge of the pathway. So we will sink those down a foot, with the tread boards, if you like, against the pathway, and then back up all the soil into the back of them. That will then hold the side of pathways in place. We most probably need about 5 or 6 meters, so 3 of those will do that job, I think. Yeah, anyway, there we are. I hadn't really intended to do anything today, but then I thought, well, I better have a job to do. I need to get the beans in, so I'll bring the beans down, because if the delivery guy is late and I have an hour to kill, where I could be weeding, of course, but I have an hour to kill, I can get the beans in. What actually happened is the delivery driver, who was absolutely fabulous, turned up absolutely bang on time. So got that job done, those all sorted, and then I had an hour to plant my beans. Of course, what has happened is it's only taken me a short while to do that, which has been great. They've had a water. Despite the torrential rain we're due tomorrow, I'm going to give them another water now. So yeah, I was, interestingly, I'm waffling now, I know, but interestingly, I was just talking to another plotter who's had quite a lot of larvae, ladybird larvae, on her plot. And I've looked around her plot, and she doesn't have any of those cocoons, any of those pupa, on any of her edges. Isn't that interesting? I think they must just be maybe 2 weeks later than mine, because I think we got the black fly up here quicker, and we got the ladybirds sooner, rather, I mean not quicker, sooner. We got the ladybirds sooner, therefore of course we have the ladybird larvae sooner, and we have the pupating ladybird sooner. So yeah, there we are. Anyway, waffling. The lavender is getting ready to flower. It's already showing its colour. So I'm going to leave you with a corner shot of the lavender down there. And I'm going to wish you all goodbye. So whatever is happening in your garden, your growing space, or your allotment, I hope you're enjoying things. And if you're having to shuffle things around like I was doing with the delivery of those steels and beans and weeding and things, I hope you're managing to keep on top of things. I think after rains, I'm going to need to do an awful lot of cutting back with shears to get some long grasses in order, but that will be for another day, maybe Sunday. Right, I will see you on Planet Vegetaria for further segments as we go through the week next week. And if you watch on YouTube, I'll see you in a week's time for another full upload. And I am still thinking about changing the way I do a week at the plot, but we haven't talked about it this week, and I'm not going to waffle on now. See you very soon, and happy growing. Bye.